afternoon. This is a public hearing in the matters docketed DPU 18-28, petition of Massachusetts Electric Company and Nantucket Electric Company doing business as National Grid for approval of its 2018 Smart Grid Pilot Program Cost Recovery and Reconciliation filing, and DPU 18-29, petition of Massachusetts Electric Company and Nantucket Electric Company doing business as National Grid for approval of its 2018 Smart Grid Pilot Program Extension Cost Recovery filing. My name is Dan Licata. I am the hearing officer assigned to this proceeding. With me on the bench today are Travis Lindsay of the department's Electric Power Division and Peter Majeski of the department's Rates and Revenue Requirements Division. As an initial matter, I want to advise all those present today that videotaping of this hearing, including audio recording, is occurring. I am allowing this to occur on the conditions that videotaping is done in a manner that is not disruptive to this hearing, and two, that the videotaping is not likely to discourage participation in this hearing. By way of background regarding the purpose of today's hearing, on March 16, 2018, National Grid filed with the department a request to recover costs associated with implementing its Smart Grid pilot program between 2012 and 2016. On the same day, National Grid also filed with the department a request to recover costs associated with implementing the extension of its Smart Grid pilot program during 2017. On April 11, 2018, the department consolidated these two matters for investigation, pursuant to 220 CMR 1.09. On April 28, 2018, the department approved the company's proposed cost recovery factors in this docket for effect on May 1, 2018, subject to reconciliation after further investigation. This is a public hearing to allow any interested persons to comment on National Grid's requests with respect to these dockets. This public hearing will be followed by a procedural conference, at which time the department will discuss the scheduling of this proceeding. May I have the appearance of counsel for National Grid?
Yes, my name is Melissa Liazis, appearing on behalf of National Grid.
Good afternoon, counsel. The department required National Grid to provide notice of today's public hearing and procedural conference in accordance with its July 30th, 2018 order of notice issued in this proceeding. On August 31st, 2018, National Grid filed with the department a return of service and proof of publication. I have reviewed the documents provided by the company, and they appear to be in order, and I accept them as such. The department also received the Attorney General's Notice of Intervention under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 12, Section 11E. The Attorney General for the Commonwealth is recognized as a party in this proceeding. May I have the appearance of counsel for the Attorney General?
Alexander Early and Shannon Beal from the Office of the Attorney General.
Good afternoon, counsel. The deadline for filing a petition to intervene in this proceeding was August 29th, 2018. Aside from the Attorney General, there have been no timely filed petitions to intervene. I will ask at this time, have I missed any petitions to intervene? Let the record reflect a negative response. It's my understanding that there are members of the public present here today who wish to be heard on National Grid's petitions in these dockets. As I mentioned before the hearing, if you wish to offer comments today and have not already done so, please sign in at the table just in front of the bench here, and I will begin calling names from that list in just a few moments. Before we begin receiving comments, there are a few things I'd like to mention. First, this proceeding concerns the department's consideration of National Grid's requests for approval of its aforementioned Smart Grid Pilot Program cost recovery filings. Accordingly, I ask that any person wishing to comment today focus their comments on matters relating to these cost recovery filings. Second, a stenographer is transcribing this hearing, and the transcript will become part of the file in this case. To create an accurate written record of this hearing, it is essential that only one person speak at a time. We ask that there not be any private conversations in the audience while a person is speaking, and for the same reason, we ask that anyone in attendance today refrain from disruptions like clapping or cheering. Third, if an earlier speaker has already made comments that are substantially the same as what you had planned on saying, you may, if you wish, just say, I agree with the comments made by, and name the speaker. Finally, as I mentioned before, this hearing is designed to ensure that members of the public have an opportunity to comment on the company's aforementioned filings. There are two types of statements that you may make at this hearing. You may give a sworn or unsworn statement. The department will listen with equal attentiveness to both sworn and unsworn statements and will take your views into account in either event. However, the law provides that we cannot make your statement part of a factual record in this proceeding unless it is a sworn statement. That is, we may respond to your opinions, but if you have any important fact that should go in the record, it would be preferable if you present it under oath. When you come forward to speak, I will administer the oath unless you indicate to me that you would prefer to make an unsworn statement. I will respect your preference in this matter. After I hear from all members of the public wishing to speak, I will adjourn this public hearing. The department traditionally allows elected officials the first opportunity to speak, after which I will allow members of the public to speak. Are there any elected officials who would like to make a public comment? Let the record reflect that there has been no response, so we will move next to hear from members of the public. I'll go ahead and read from the sign-in sheet in the order that people signed in. When you come forward to speak, I will ask you to state your name clearly and spell your last name for the record. I will then administer the oath unless you indicate otherwise. First person signed up to speak is Jan Johnson. Ms. Johnson, would you please approach that table right there? Would you remain standing? And raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that your testimony you are about to give is the truth?
I do.
And could you please state and spell your name for the record?
Jan, Jan. Johnson, Johnsson.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. You may proceed.
Each of you here have been selected to do your job. You are in a position of honor, or of public responsibility and of public trust. You are making decisions about the costs and the health of people in this state, including babies not even born. With that in mind, I want to talk to you about the availability of thousands of research studies connecting microwaves and health problems. That is, I'm sorry, I'm marked up because I was expecting to speak to many more people, and it's...
That's okay, take your time.
I've edited a little bit in my head. Illness from microwave is unlike traditional diseases we understand. That is, we understand illnesses that have a predictable pattern of a certain number of days, a certain rash, perhaps a predictable fever. Illness from microwaves, by contrast, is harder to understand. It seems to alter, these illnesses seem to come because there's been altering of the electrical and chemical systems of the cells in the body. The results are unpredictable, and it includes illness such as cancer, sleep problems, headaches, behavior problems, low sperm count, damaged sperm, heart problems, autism, memory loss, and other neurological problems. Industry and government representatives often dismiss this issue with the comment, there's not enough research. Well, if you're only looking at the front page of the Boston Globe as your source of research, then yes, that is true. Of course it's true. The major media and TV stations are all owned by industry. Industry does not want you to read studies that might hinder profits, so the media does not report them. Nor does industry want universities to provide honest research. So industry donates heavily to research universities to silence them. With a project that costs 40 to 60 million or more, and the risks of health to everyone in Massachusetts and the future of unborn babies, I would expect everyone involved to go beyond the Boston Globe for research. I would expect you to seek out people who have become ill from microwaves and ask, how do they know the source of their illness? They will be able to tell you. The numbers of such people are growing rapidly. Websites are popping up for people desperate for a safe place to live, away from microwaves. It's getting very scary for them. When we do the right thing, we know it because it feels good. This does not mean it feels good to your pocketbook. It means you have done the right thing in the eyes of humanity. Just because you can make a profit and be protected in a court of law doesn't mean it's right. Slavery was legal but not ethical. As humans, we all have a responsibility to protect each other. In conclusion, my daughter's best friend, 39 years old, has an adorable 7-year-old and a loving husband, and a brain tumor the size of a tangerine. A coworker of mine has a 6-month-old baby with cancer. A 6-month-old baby. This worries me. I'm sure you have your own stories. Cancer has become the leading cause of death by disease in children. We need to know what's going on, and we need to be more careful. We can't just go willy-nilly on projects when we're not sure what the results will be. We need to look at what the research is telling us, and if nothing else, use caution. The younger the child is when they begin using a cell phone, the greater is the risk of developing cancer. Think about that when you decide if it's okay to continue putting 6 to 8 smart meters outside a baby's bedroom, or erect cell towers in every neighborhood, or to allow National Grid to continue to pass on this expense to consumers. As long as we allow moneyed interests to dictate our government, we cannot be a democracy. I'd also like to read some words from someone who's not able to be here. They're not my words, but they represent my sentiments. And I also have handouts here of research places where you can easily find, with their links where you can easily find.
Would you like to first mention, provide those? And Ms. Johnson, have these already been provided to the department's e-filing website?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Her points are, just because the word sustainability has been introduced as a selling point for a project doesn't make the project ecologically or otherwise sustainable. Just because a picture was painted for an increase in electrical system reliability doesn't ensure meaningful increases in reliability and response time to outages. Just ask those in Maine already living with a smart grid. Just because consumer choice was assured doesn't mean that customers will have any meaningful choice to participate in this project, and certainly not after the end of the project period. Just because economic efficiency has been promised doesn't mean that these changes will be cost-effective, or fees or charges will not be raised very shortly after the completion of the pilot project. In fact, this is the likely scenario. Just because the program is called a pilot program doesn't mean that the outcome isn't already a foregone conclusion. Worcester residents are being coerced through silence and seduction into a grand experiment never before perpetrated on a population, one that is intended to be a precedent throughout the country. Something is very wrong with this picture when the promises don't measure the realities. All of this is familiar. Where have we heard this sweet-talking pattern before, and how many times? Please note we are dealing with an industry, a corporate business whose ultimate mission is for the betterment of its financial stakeholders. This is not coming from an altruistic social service for the good of the people and the environment. And I'd just like to point out that one of the most alarming aspects of the pilot was that the National Grid and Worcester deferred to an actual career tobacco scientist, Peter Wahlberg, to override citizens' health concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Just for the record, Ms. Johnson provided the bench with a physician and citizens' concerns about microwave technology website and a listing of websites. Thank you for coming in tonight. I'm going to go ahead and call the next member on the sign sheet of the public, Ms. Cecilia Doucette. Ms. Doucette, would you come forward and remain standing? Could you state and spell your name for the record, ma'am?
Cecilia Doucette, C-E-C-E-L-I-A, Doucette, D-O-U-C-E-T-T-E.
And could you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, ma'am?
I do.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you. Thank you for your earlier investigation into the concerns about health effects from wireless technology as recorded in DPU 12-76-B, pages 37 through 49, published on June 12, 2014. There have been many changes that have occurred across the world since then, and I appreciate this opportunity to update you with a refresher on how the FCC public radiation limits were set, new science concluding wireless radiation is biologically hazardous at non-thermal levels, current federal priorities and investigations, state-level advances, legal and financial risks, and solutions for safe technology. Based on the new facts that I will present, I hope you will agree it is not in the best interest of Massachusetts ratepayers to pay to have toxic wireless radiation-emitting utility electric meters installed on our homes, schools, and places of work. And this will also apply to any other wireless technology that the DPU is considering, from water meters to gas meters to solar inverters, and the upcoming 5G to enable the Internet of Things. Nor is it in the best interest of ratepayers to pay to have wireless communication facilities, or WCFs, mounted by the utility and telecommunications companies on or near residencies, schools, healthcare facilities, parks, and other properties where the public spends its time. We should, in fact, stop the National Grid pilot program, remove the toxic radio frequency radiation emitting meters that they have installed, and work with the industry to bring biologically safe technology to market before taking any further steps to modernize the electric grid. To give you some background information, when we look at the electromagnetic radiation spectrum, we see that in the microwave segment, we have cell towers, cell phones, utility meters, or smart meters as they're calling them, microwave ovens, Wi-Fi, cordless baby monitors, and radar. That's all in the microwave radiation spectrum. The way that the industry determined how much radiation the public can be exposed to was through SAM. SAM is an anthropomorphic adult mannequin. SAM is a male model, military model, 220 pounds, 6'2", in the 90th percentile of military fitness. What they did with SAM is went off of a theory to say how much heat would it take when we put this probe inside the gel, the water-based gel in Sam's head, how much heat in a half an hour from one device would it take to raise the temperature of that gel? That's all that was ever done. We have no safety testing on any wireless technology that was brought to market. This is just a thermal-based theory. There were never any safety tests on children or fetuses, which we know are the most vulnerable during their developmental lives. There was no safety testing on the elderly, and there's been no safety testing on people with existing health conditions. In your record from the past, somebody submitted the Bioinitiative report, which is a compendium of the science. It was dismissed the last time around. This report from the Bioinitiative group was enough, though, to get our government to take notice. When that Bioinitiative report was re-released in 2012, the U.S. Government Accountability Office ordered the telecommunications, the FCC, with this. Exposure and testing requirements for mobile phones should be reassessed. Now remember, when we look at this electromagnetic radiation spectrum, anytime we say microwave radiation, anytime we say radio frequency radiation or electromagnetic fields for cell phones, it applies to everything in the microwave radiation spectrum. So we have to keep that in mind because it includes the smart meters that are in question today. The only thing that the FCC has done is to open up a docket in 2012. Hundreds upon hundreds of testimonies have been sent in by the American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, world-leading microwave radiation scientists, because remember, when the FCC set those limits way up here, they were not set by scientists, they were not set by doctors, they were not set by people with biological expertise. They were set by electrical and electronic engineers. But if you look at the fine print that comes with all of our devices, I would invite anybody in the room who has an iPhone with them today. If you go into settings, and then just remember the acronym GAL, like this gal at the DPU hearing suggested. From settings, you go into general, that's the G, about, that's the A, and then legal. And when you scroll all the way down to legal, you will see RF exposure, which is radio frequency microwave radiation, that the industry politely calls energy. And when you read that legal fine print, it tells us two really important things. One, keep this device X amount of different distance from your body, or you may exceed the FCC limits for public radiation exposure. And two, use a hands-free option, like speakerphone or a headset. And if anybody chooses to use the headset, you would be well advised not to use the wire one that comes with your device, because radiation travels up wire. You can, however, get a hollow tube headset that works like the acoustics off of a physician's stethoscope, and it's got beads here that block the radiation from traveling. So there are solutions, but nobody knows that that fine print is there. They give us these devices with 5 or 6 antennas radiating. Every one of our cell phones now has a cell antenna, a data antenna, a Bluetooth antenna, a Wi-Fi antenna, a locator antenna, and by now, the industry is using us as their network with public hotspots. So that one device we walk around with all day, holding it in our hands, putting it in our bras, our jackets, our shirt pockets, tucking them in here, using them on our laps, putting them in our back pockets. And we know that the science is becoming clearer and clearer that that's a really bad idea. The smart utility meters run off that same microwave radiation. So to give you an update on what the science is saying today, longtime World Health Organization advisor, Dr. Anthony Miller, updates opinion linking wired cancer or wireless to cancer based on new scientific evidence. Dr. Anthony Miller is a former World Health Organization advisor. He's a physician, he's done research, and he is now saying we conclusively have enough evidence through the scientific literature to say microwave radiation is carcinogenic. Perhaps most important for our country right now is the U.S. National Toxicology Program a decade ago began a study that went in expecting to prove that cell phones are fine, and again, that was the technology of the day with cell phones, but it all runs off of microwave radiation still today. They went in expecting it was safe, and instead what they found is DNA damage, which is the roadmap to grow a proper human, brain tumors, and heart tumors. And that $25 million study report is due out this fall, and the industry is moving frantically to get their infrastructure in before they do. Some people will say, oh, but you need more than one study to confirm this is really happening. The Ramazzini Institute in Italy, right on the heels of the NTP study, published another major large study with the same findings of brain tumors, heart tumors, and DNA damage. And we know we're all very sad that we just lost Senator John McCain, who was left-handed. And Senator McCain's glioblastoma brain tumor was right here where he held his cell phone. He had already had other tumors removed from the vicinity. our own Senator Ted Kennedy, right-handed, same tumor, glioblastoma. So Dr. Martin Paul is a professor emeritus from Washington State University who has done a lot of the analysis on the existing science, and he has just put out a new paper with a summary of 8 different ways in which the science, and when he talks about each one of these points, there are many reviews done for each point, and behind every review is a whole stack of scientific literature. Number 1, attack our nervous system, including our brains, leading to widespread neurological and neuropsychiatric effects. Number 2, attack our endocrine or hormonal systems. Number 3, produce oxidative stress and free radical damage, which have central roles in essentially all chronic disease. Number 4, attack the DNA of our cells, producing single-strand and double-strand breaks in cellular DNA and oxidized bases in our cellular DNA. These in turn produce cancer, also mutations in germline cells, which produce mutations in future generations. Number 5, produce elevated levels of apoptosis, which is programmed cell death. Events especially important in causing both neurodegenerative disease and infertility. Number 6, lower male and female infertility, lower sex hormones, lower libido, and increased levels of spontaneous abortion. Number 7, produce excessive intracellular calcium and excessive calcium signaling. Number 8, attack the cells of our bodies to cause cancer. So the science is very clear today. We should not be putting radio frequency radiation emitting devices on our homes or in our homes. And I mentioned earlier that the IEEE, the Professional Association for the International Electrical and Electronic Engineers, they help to inform those FCCs. We don't even have standards, they're just guidelines. They helped to inform those back in the 90s. They're now saying that there are biological effects from microwave radiation, radio frequency radiation. And in their issue that's coming out for September, October in IEEE Microwave Magazine, clear evidence of cell phone RF radiation cancer leak. So even the ones who told the FCC what they thought might work with a thermal effect are now conceding we have great risk at the non-thermal level. So that's a summary of the science. What we have now is an industry that knows that this is coming, and they are pushing frantically to get their infrastructure in before the rest of us find out. At the federal level, there are more than 50 bills being put forth by the FCC and the industry to take away home rule from our municipalities to say if or where we may even want any of this new technology. They want to take away home rule so that they can put infrastructure in now for 5G and the Internet of Things. So remember that spectrum chart I showed? We have used up the good spectrum with 3G and 4G technology. What's left is this crummy end of millimeter waves. These are short little waves, right? So they can't carry very much data very fast or very far. So what the industry would like to do is add to the existing infrastructure that we've got now. So in addition to all the cell towers we see around now, they would still use that as an integral part of 5G, but it can't carry the data and it can't go through buildings as well as 3 and 4G do. So the industry wants to put antennas on poles in the public access way every 2 to 12 houses inside our neighborhoods, right at bedroom level. And our scientists are just beside themselves because they know this is just going to be the biggest public health crisis that our world has ever known. And so 5G, we all need to come up to speed with very quickly. And as Ms. Johnson indicated, the industry has known about this. In 2015, subsequent to your last reporting, in 2015, Harvard's Law School Center for Ethics put out a report called Captured Agency, how the Federal Communications Commission is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. And it chronicles just at what point our industry leaders knew about this, way back in the 1990s. Instead of invoking the precautionary principle when their own scientists found cancer and especially harm to children, they did not invoke the precautionary principle and protect the public. As she indicated, their interests are financial. So they lobbied heavily and got the Telecom Act passed in Section 704, which they hope to keep people from complaining of any ill health from microwave radiation emissions. This spring in 2018, The Nation, which I understand is our country's oldest magazine, put out an investigative report called How Big Wireless Made Us Think That Cell Phones Are Safe, a special investigation, the disinformation campaign, and massive radiation increase behind the 5G rollout. So the industry has known, but they are not a health board with the FCC. The programs that were investigating non-thermal effects were defunded when the Telecom Act was passed, and the industry has been allowed to put this technology out there for the public at levels this high when the biological effects are showing harm way down here. In 2000 even, the parent company of our T-Mobile, the T-Mobile company in Germany, commissioned a report called Mobile Telecommunications and Health, Review of the Current Scientific Research in View of Precautionary Health Protection. And when they didn't like what the scientists were telling them, they too buried the evidence of harm. But we are just at one point in time, and I would like to think that if we all do what we are morally obliged to do and learn about this, protect the public, and come up with the industry with safer solutions for accessing technology, we can continue to advance, we can move ahead. But by putting out more wireless technology at a point in history when we know it is extremely biologically hazardous is ill-advised. The state of California wrote a public health fact sheet about cell phones over a decade, well, in 2009. It was suppressed, and it took a lawsuit by Dr. Joel Moskowitz at the University of California, Berkeley, to get this released. It finally came out to the public last December. And it says we have got to protect ourselves, and we've got to protect especially our children. The International Association of Firefighters have already banded together and said no more cell towers, no more wireless technology on our facilities. Out in Santa Barbara, the firefighters who had been serving this community for decades were going out to calls and couldn't remember where they were going, and they know those streets like the back of their hands. It causes great cognitive impairment, and the International Association of Firefighters will not allow this technology on their property. I think the public deserves the same protections. In Maryland, they examined this issue, and about a year and a half ago, they became the first Department of Public Health to recommend only hard wiring in our schools because our children are among the most vulnerable and they should not be exposed to toxic wireless radiation. Here in Massachusetts, Ashland Public Schools has become the first in the United States to begin addressing Wi-Fi in particular in our schools and taking actual precautionary measures. It says to turn off the devices when not in use, turn off the Wi-Fi, because right now in this room, we have 3 access points pulsing microwave radiation, and that should not be emitted in our classrooms and our hallways at school for the children to absorb that. And I know it, for many of you, if this is the first time you're hearing about this issue, it's a lot to get your mind around. But sometimes getting an audio or a visual is helpful. This is a microwave radiation detection meter. It's about a $400 device. And if there were no wireless signals, no radio frequency in here, all we'd hear is a crackle confirming the device is working. When I turn it on, you will see either green, which is at the levels where science is still investigating, yellow, where people become electrically sensitive. They might not be sleeping well anymore. They might be getting headaches and nosebleeds that their doctors can't figure out. They might have ringing in the ears, dizziness, nausea, headaches, cognitive impairment, brain fog, skin rashes, because we have little antennas in our skin that react very badly to microwave radiation sometimes. So in this room, we are way into the red zone. And this is pretty much what we've all kind of bought. You know, the industry tells us all Wi-Fi all the time. We say, okay, why not? We can't see it, we can't taste it or hear it or smell it. But with a good detection meter, we can understand, and we should not be putting devices on our homes from our public utility companies that expose our families to this. So Worcester Public Schools also took a look at this, and they have put up a radio frequency exposure notification on their public school website. They are waiting for higher authorities, just like Ashland is, to tell them what to do, because they're not scientists, they're not doctors, but we need the public protection on this. And so Worcester, out where your pilot program is, they had been talking about it with school committee as well. Ashland has become the first in the nation to put one of these devices on loan in their public library. Our residents can take it out for a week at a time and measure, and then think about what can I do to reduce my exposure to myself and my loved ones, or my colleagues at work, or my children's classmates and teachers at school. Ashland has also become the first in the nation to host a 6-part documentary film and discussion series. There are videos out there, there are DVDs, there are public talks that any community can start coming up to speed with. Dr. Robert Knorr, who's the head of the epidemiology department at the Department of Public Health, has already written 4 fact sheets on EMFs, or electromagnetic fields, all of this man-made radiation. He has one for cell towers, one for cell phones, one for Wi-Fi that would include the smart meters, and one for high voltage power lines, which you guys should be interested in as well, because there's a lot of harm that goes with that. So even as we're coming up to know that all this harm is existing, the industry is still pushing to get their toxic infrastructure out there. Sprint has given high school students in Brockton free smartphones and tablets without any technology safety guidance on those. Verizon is already testing 5G in 11 cities across the US. Other carriers are doing the same. Both Brockton, no coincidence there with Sprint, both Brockton and Natick are now test cities for 5G technology. So when I helped Ashland Public Schools learn about this issue, I didn't know anything. I thought surely somebody smarter than me would already say, yeah, we know, we've got this, our kids are safe. Well, I used to run our education foundation, and I personally ran 7 campaigns to get technology into our schools. And then I find out that all this wireless is hurting our kids. So that's why I'm here, because that's how I fell down the rabbit hole. So Ashland's still waiting for higher authorities to do this, though. I think when they read the legal fine print, they had a legal uh-oh moment, because they knew they had given those kids and the teachers wireless radiation emitting devices with no safety. So I went to Senator Karen Spilka, who's my senator, and I met with her and her district director in our district, and I taught them what I was learning, and I measured Senator Spilka's cell phone, I measured her district director's laptop. Both devices went right off the charts, and they're looking at me like, really? And I'm like, yes. And who would ever know that this is a biological hazard? So Senator Spilka put me with a lawyer in her office, and together we crafted a very simple bill that says, let's get the right minds to the table at the state level. Look at the non-industry funded science, because we know in big tobacco fashion, as Harvard's Captured Agency report indicates, the industry will do its own studies under limited conditions that will show no evidence of harm. Well, no evidence of harm is never the same thing as safe, and just because the industry does one study over here, it does not cancel out the peer-reviewed independent science over here. So we need to understand the games that sometimes the big tobacco playbook would have us engage in. So Senator Spilka introduced a bill for me last session. The Joint Committee on Public Health received testimony from all over the world and from within the state, and they reported that bill out favorably. It was introduced under my name. At the next stage of the legislative process, it was bundled with a whole bunch of other bills that were put into a lot that did not progress. This session, though, Senator Spilka introduced the bill again as a resolve to try and get this commission put together to address this. And she did it under her own name this time, so Senator Spilka is directly sponsoring that bill. You may also be aware that Senator Michael Moore this session introduced another bill, Senate Bill 1864, an act relative to utilities, smart meters, and ratepayer rights. That would give the Commonwealth the right to choose whether or not they even want to have a microwave radiation emitting device on their home, and to not be penalized if they choose to stick with their old reliable analog meter. Those old meters with just the dials, they last 30, 40 years. These new smart meters, you're going to be into it to be replacing those much sooner and many times over. And they're emitting microwave radiation. So as a first step, Senator Moore wanted to give people the right to choose whether or not they want to retain their their analog meter and not have wireless. That bill did not progress this session. And then additional bills started popping up around the state. So Senator Spilka's bill, Senator Moore's bill, and then Senator Julian Cyr introduced two bills. He's our senator from the Cape and the Islands. Out in Berkeley, California, they wanted to give people the right to know. They wrote an ordinance that Harvard's Professor Larry Lessig, defended pro bono. He helped them write this. The industry came and sued 3 times. The industry lost 3 times. And so our Senator Cyr wrote legislation to ask that we give the public the right to know that wireless technology is hazardous. And so he introduced 2 bills, one for the point of purchase and one to label the devices and to protect our children above all else. His bills are still active. There were 2 bills introduced by a constituent by Senator Humison, and one would be to get our medical community trained on this, because unless you happen to have studied environmental medicine or have gone back for continuing education credits, most doctors have no idea what to do with these symptoms that people come in with because they don't know to connect it to wireless radiation toxicity. So Senator Humison introduced a bill to get our medical community trained and get insurance coverage, and also another bill to protect our students in school. And then there was a 7th bill that Representative Carolyn Dykema introduced, and she saw Ashland Public Schools best practices for mobile devices, and she thought it's about time that our Department of Elementary and Secondary Education protect all of our students and staff. So she wrote up a little bill for that too. Her bill progressed. It was assigned to education, as was the other bill. After hearing testimony, the Joint Committee on Education discharged those bills to the Joint Committee on Public Health. And we now have 4 bills that are still advancing. In fact, when the Joint Committee on Consumer Protection and Professional Licensure saw those 2 bills by Senator Cyr to give people the right to know, they put a research analyst on this, and they took an extension on their reporting out. They took that time and they did the deep dive and they investigated this issue. And then the Joint Committee on Consumer Protection actually wrote their own bill, Senate Resolve 2431, to start getting the right commission pulled together to get to the bottom of this and start protecting the public. So we're very fortunate. We actually lead the United States with these 8 bills. And there's actually a 9th one that pertains to extremely low frequencies, and that is by Rep. Linsky out of Natick, because he has a cancer cluster out there under the high voltage power lines, which is another form of man-made radiation. So we are at a unique point in time. I had the privilege of somebody down at the National Institutes of Health saw my work. I've transitioned to do technology safety education because somebody's got to tell us what's going on. They saw some of my work and invited me to co-chair a panel at the National Institutes of Health this summer at the Health in Buildings Roundtable Conference. And they asked me to bring experts. I brought Dr. Martin Paul, who has done that summary of the reviews on the science. I brought with me the former president of Microsoft Canada, And I had the good fortune of meeting Mr. Frank Clegg here in Massachusetts in 2015 when a panel of world experts came to the Massachusetts State Legislature to say we all deserve a right to know and we deserve public protections from microwave radiation. So Mr. Clegg flew down to the NIH on his own time and dime to teach us that the industry knows full well this is going on and that they can do better if given a nudge. So I hope that we will use our resources from where we each sit today to do the right thing and to investigate. Don't take my word on anything. Get in and do the investigation, look at the non-industry funded science, and then decide how we're going to protect the public. We have a crossroads with the legal community as well. Some of you may know there's a federal lawsuit at the Fay School out in Southborough, Massachusetts. There are children out there who have become ill from the industrial strength microwave radiation, and it's in the Worcester court system. This little boy at age 10 started getting headaches that eventually came on with headaches and nosebleeds, nausea, dizziness, he couldn't focus. He was otherwise a great kid, happy, healthy, well-adjusted, great little student, but he kept winding up in the nurse's office. And the parents would pick him up. Some days he'd buck up and go back to class. Other days they'd get him home, they'd get him to the doctors. The doctors run the tests they know to run, but they don't know what to test for microwave toxicity. And so after a couple of years, the parents started noticing a pattern. When he was away from school, his symptoms would resolve. But within a day or two of being back at the Fay School on summer break or holiday breaks, everything would come back. So they're like, well, what is going on? So they started researching his symptoms. And that's where they discovered electrical sensitivities, which a lot of people develop after a smart meter is installed on their homes. Or, as Ms. Johnson said, a bank of smart meters being put on your home, on your apartment, on your condo. You're getting walloped by microwave radiation. So there is this federal lawsuit in Massachusetts at the Fay School. And in doing, and you guys might know the terminology better than me, but when they vetted the witnesses, Dr. David Carpenter, who is an expert out of one of the universities in New York, Dr. Martha Herbert, who's from Harvard, she also runs the autism lab at Mass General. He is allowing their testimony to be admitted because they have shown through the science that there is great evidence of harm at the non-thermal level. This is groundbreaking in U.S. courts. So that case is still ongoing. You may or may not know that the insurance industry has already recognized radiofrequency radiation as a leading risk. They have put exclusions in their policies saying, we're not covering microwave radiation. So who does that leave? The industry doesn't have insurance. Who does that leave but our towns, our cities, and our individuals left holding the bag when something goes wrong? If a smart meter catches fire, which we understand there have been many, many cases of that, because they're not properly grounded oftentimes, they're not using professionals to do these installations. A woman in New York contacted me to say, why did they jump the fence and come in beyond my no trespassing sign, cut the cable that I had around my meter box because I don't want this on my home? Why are they doing that? Well, she found out that in certain areas, they're getting people in society who don't have a lot going for them. They put them in smart meter school, and then they incentivize them. If you can go out and get 100% in this neighborhood, we're going to give you a bonus. So those are some underhanded tactics that have been identified in other communities. And it's really important to make sure that when we do put any kind of a device on, that it's properly grounded. Otherwise, all that radio frequency radiation hops on all of your wiring in the home, and you're now sitting inside of a hot box. So there's lots going on in the legal arena. Italian courts have already found in favor of people who have been harmed from radio frequency radiation, There's a woman in Grenoble, France, who's been given our equivalent of disability because of the smart meter that was installed on her home. So there are many legal precedents being set all around the world right now, and we need to investigate those and realize that the Commonwealth could be held liable, and we could find ourselves spending a lot more money than just what these cost overruns are with National Grid. There's a gentleman by the name of Rich Lear who has done data analysis his whole life, and he started mining our federal databases on illnesses and identified 40 diseases that have just skyrocketed over the last 25 years. And when you look at all of those diseases, he has identified that it looks like the smoking gun is a free radical called peroxynitrite. Dr. Martin Paul's work shows that radiofrequency radiation causes peroxynitrite. So when he did the investigation and he did the cost analysis, the annual economic burden of just 40 fast-growing chronic diseases tracked in this paper is more than 2.5 trillion annually in the US. With increased public awareness coupled with enlightened action, this cost to society can be reduced to a fraction by simply implementing the knowledge that we have. Now to talk about solutions. Our world scientists, who are the biological experts in this, not industry scientists who are not biological experts, who have not been paid off by the industry, but the actual independent world experts on microwave radiation, have put their name to paper, which is a very courageous thing to do because it could mean career suicide. They put their name to paper in an appeal to the World Health Organization and to the United Nations and all their member states, saying, we know enough now, we have got to get out ahead of this. Collectively, they are requesting that children and pregnant women be protected, and when you put a smart meter on a house, you don't know who's on the other side of that wall. Guidelines and regulatory standards need to be strengthened. Manufacturers need to be encouraged to please develop safer technology. Utilities responsible for the generation, transmission, distribution, and monitoring of electricity need to maintain adequate power quality and ensure proper electrical wiring to minimize harmful ground current. Number 5, the public needs to be fully informed about the potential health risks from electromagnetic energy and taught harm reduction strategies. If you can help the Department of Public Health release those public health fact sheets, that will go a long way in Massachusetts and serve as a guiding example for the rest of our country. Medical professionals need to be educated about the biological effects of electromagnetic energy and be provided training on treatments of patients with electromagnetic sensitivity. Number 7, governments need to fund training and research on electromagnetic fields and health that is independent of industry and mandate industry cooperation with the researchers. Number 8, media needs to disclose experts' financial relationships with industry when citing their opinions regarding health and safety aspects of EMF-emitting technologies. And 9, white zones or radiation-free areas need to be established. There are people in this room who are already electrically sensitive, and sitting here under these routers, we've got 1, 2, 3 in this one not even very large room is way overkill. We don't need that, and those should be hardwired. Run a wire to it. You don't need that. You can hardwire your iPads, you can hardwire your tablets, you can hardwire your cell phones with very simple adapters. $32 for the iPhone and the iPad one, about $12 for the Chromebook. And not all of the Androids have an operating system that allow you to hardwire it. But the solutions are very simple if only the public were educated on this. So not every country has done what we've done here in the United States. If we look at some international exposure standards of cell phone frequencies, we'll see that countries like Salzburg has set their limits at the biological limits that would get them a clean reading on a meter like this. Switzerland allows 4 microwatts per centimeter squared, China 6, Russia and Italy 10. The United States, 580. That's thousands of times higher than where the biological limits have been established. France came out with a national law forbidding any kind of wireless technology around children, preschools, kindergartens, nurseries, no wireless radiation. And in the older grades, they can only have it on when it's absolutely necessary. Other than that, it's all turned off or hardwired. The Mediterranean country of Cyprus in November made a national declaration on EMFs, or electromagnetic fields. They've already given their public a 16-point fact sheet to teach them how to reduce their microwave radiation exposures and choose hardwired technology. The United States Access Board for years has already recognized electrical sensitivities. So we don't have to decide for ourselves whether these things exist or not. They exist. The public just simply has been kept in the dark about all of this by industry. So as admirable as it is, the National Grid allows people to opt out with this form. It's not enough. We should have never put, without informed consent, microwave radiation emitting toxic meters on the homes and businesses of the poor, unsuspecting people of Worcester. And I might also add, I was just asked to join a meeting with Congressman Jim McGovern out in Amherst, where a woman who's developed electrical sensitivities can't stay in her house if they don't get that smart meter off of her home. And she gets her service through another one of the energy companies who will not take it off. They said, oh, we'll move it around your property, but she's still gonna get microwave radiation. And she's brought in building biologists, and she has the data to show that that has hopped the wires in her house, and now her whole house is just emanating microwave radiation. So this issue is very real. It's very much happening right now. Even just with the knowledge that I've given today, some people may go home and say, well, gosh, I'm gonna get rid of that decked cordless phone that's sitting next to my nightstand because it's like a little cell tower in my own home. I'm gonna turn off the router tonight. I'm gonna put my cell phone in airplane mode. I'm gonna take that wearable off and not go to sleep with a microwave radiation thing. Because the science shows us this hurts our bodies in at least 4 different ways. One is it interferes with our circadian rhythm. In the wee hours of darkness, the pineal gland in our brain is meant to release melatonin. Melatonin then goes in and clears out the toxins of the day, but it also regulates our sleep cycle. So a lot of people start sleeping through the night again once they know, get all the wireless out, especially during your sleeping hours. 2, we know that this magnetizes our blood cells instead of free floating as it would do to bring the oxygen up throughout our bodies. This is causing a Rolo effect where it causes our blood cells to stack up like a roll of coins, and then that can't go where it needs to go, so people start getting headaches or nausea because it affects so many different parts of our bodies. 3, as Dr. Paul mentioned, it causes this chemical reaction outside the cell wall at the calcium, the VGCCs, the voltage-gated calcium channels, and that creates this horrific free radical called peroxide nitride. And we know, fourthly, that in a controlled medical setting, we can use microwave radiation to do some pretty amazing things like stimulate stem cells, we can stimulate bone cell growth, but in this ubiquitous, uncontrolled way that the industry has rolled this out to the public, we have no control over what's going on outside of our homes. And the public deserves to not be forced to pay for overruns from a program that's causing microwave radiation toxicity. So I hope that you will take the time to investigate the information I presented today. I prepared 2 binders for you. This one, the littler one, contains information on all that I've spoken to you about today, and there's a really good document in there that I put in full, and you may want to look at it online though, because when I copied it in, it corrupted a lot of the formatting. But this is a new 2018 report called Reinventing Wires, the Future of Landlines and Networks from the National Institute for Science, Law, and Public Policy. And they walk you through, and it would be especially relevant to people at the Department of Public Utilities and the Attorney General's Office and National Grid. They walk you through the exact reasons why wireless is a very poor choice. You would believe the energy consumption that goes off with wireless, when if we hardwired, we would save so much in our green footprint. And that, in addition to all the other health things, it's not sustainable. So this is an excellent report to really get a snapshot today of what wireless technology means and why it's so much smarter to actually hardwire, build out our fiber optic infrastructures, maybe even let our towns build their own internet communication systems. The industry is trying to cripple people on that one too. But there are great ways for reducing even just the power consumption of Wi-Fi networks. Reduce the frequency of the beaconing signal. We don't need those routers beaconing 10 times a second up there. There's been a pilot done out in Palo Alto school systems where they have reduced it down to just once a second. That in itself saves a ton of energy, but it also means you've just cut your microwave radiation exposure by 90% from those. There is a patent that's been held by Swisscom for years. It's eco technology. Have everything go to sleep except for when somebody's trying to make a connection. Today it's all Wi-Fi all the time. Everything's beaconing all the time. We don't need that. German phones. You can get an EcoDex cordless phone that only irradiates when there's a call in play. The one sitting on my nightstand was going like this all the time. Hardwire as many devices as possible. My house is completely hardwired with Ethernet cables. I got my daughter's adapters for their MacBook and their iPhones. And when they're home doing homework for 3 hours a night and texting with friends and stuff, they're not using the devices on their lap because the heat in itself is bad. But off on a desk, off on the end of the couch, I know that I've given them safe technology. And right now, I was shocked to find when I looked at what my triple play was from Verizon or Comcast for phone, cable, and internet. I found out that with Verizon right now, that box that they wanted to put in my house had a 2.4 gigahertz antenna in it. It had a 5 gigahertz antenna in it. It had a 2.5 gigahertz hotspot antenna. It had a 5 gigahertz hotspot antenna. And when we switched over to Comcast, my husband asked if they would be so kind to make sure that we don't have any radiation emitting, because once you put an Ethernet cable into the jack, you just run your signal through the cable and it's a lot faster, more data secure, and a lot safer. So they said, oh yeah, we know, we can make that happen. So the guy was really nice, he installed everything, and I went down with my meter and I said, okay, let me just verify. And I turned it on and it did this. And I said, now, you turned off the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, and the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz hotspot, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, so why is it still emitting microwave radiation? So he went back to his support desk. They didn't know. He brought in his manager the next day. He didn't know. And by then, we had gone out and bought our own router modem because we couldn't have that knowingly in our house. So I reached out to somebody in Silicon Valley who really understands this stuff inside and out, and I said, I remember you saying there was another antenna in there. What is that? And he said, oh, you have to call Comcast and go to level 2 customer support, and they will let you know that it is a 5th antenna in there, pulsing constantly at your loved ones, for the home security system, which you may or may not even have. But all these antennas come to us all Wi-Fi all the time. And we don't need that. We need to start investigating, come to an agreement that there are much smarter ways to use technology, primarily through fiber optics to Ethernet to connectors. But we should never put a microwave radiation transmitting device on our home knowing what the science is telling us today. So thank you. I appreciate your patience. In this packet that I'm going to give you, with the testimony that I just given, there's a woman in Australia by the name of Lynn McLean who used to be a teacher, and then she went to work for her government in telecom, and she quickly put 2 and 2 together that this is especially biologically hazardous to children. So she wrote this little book called Wireless Wise Kids. It's just a little simple scholastic-sized book, and for children, it's a great primer, or for any of us adults who are just learning about this, it's a great primer. I have had the privilege of working with some of the world's leading scientists on this journey, some of the world's leading doctors who are already treating patients for this, and we have formed a very little nonprofit called Wireless Education out of the UK with leading scientists from Sweden and Finland. And we have built the training that the public needs for this. We have condensed all of the science and the risks that I've shared with you today into a half-hour online course for schools and families. We could train the Commonwealth tomorrow. We've built a second half-hour course for the corporate induction safety environment. Again, in a half-hour on your lunch break, you could take this course. It'll teach you the risks biologically as well as the legal risks we talked about. And it kicks out a tip sheet at the end. You can walk around, hang it on your fridge, hang it in your office, saying, oh yeah, I need to remember, do this or that. And then another great teaching tool is a new film called Generation Zapped. Generation Zapped is with the world's leading scientists and patients who are already suffering from this. And it just won Best Documentary at the DC Independent Film Festival. It's been recognized in Sedona and many other major ones. It was released to the public last month. We had a screening at the Massachusetts State House. There have been more than a dozen screenings throughout Massachusetts at public libraries. So anybody can have access to this information. And actually, the producer was very gracious to let us run it on a continuous loop down at that 2-day conference at the National Institutes of Health. So word is getting out. It would be foolish of us to invest any more finance into what's being called a smart grid when we know it's not smart at all. It's in fact very biologically hazardous, and we should not ask ratepayers to pay for that when they never consented to having biologically hazardous technology imposed upon their homes. So the press release that was originally done when we only had 7 bills in the legislature is part of this packet. Every time I go out to present, I hear the same thing. Well, the FCC says it's fine. Well, now we know how to respond to that. They'll say, with the inverse square law of physics, if you have distance, you're safe. Well, if you have a sniper on that building, guess what? He's still going to get us in here. And all those microwave radiation signals coming from the outside are still getting us in here. So distance is smart for sure. Don't put that cell phone in your bra or your pocket. Don't stick it in your abdomen or your backside. But there has never been a safe level of microwave radiation identified. So I prepared 3 sets of these for your office, 1 for you, 2 for the public. I prepared 1 for you, and if you'd like, I'll give you 1 too.
Well, it's a matter of course, something that's provided to one party should be provided.
Okay. So that's in this littler binder. What I've done in the other binder is printed out for you many of the testimonies that were sent in for the Massachusetts bills. And I have categorized them. I've given a copy of the bills themselves so you can read them in there. We've got testimony from leading world scientists. We've got testimony from industry whistleblowers and engineers. We have healthcare professionals, educators, global citizens, US citizens, and Massachusetts residents. So I hope you'll all take this to heart, take the time to do your investigation. I know I've already met with Elizabeth Hurley out in Worcester in the Attorney General's office. I was able to give Maura Healy a bit of information on this. She has connected me with the Boston office, but we have yet to actually have a meeting. So I'd be very grateful if I could come in and meet with the Attorney General's office. And I would certainly be grateful to meet with National Grid because there are many solutions out there, but imposing a utility smart meter on our homes, be it electric, gas, water, solar, is a really bad idea. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Sam. And if you want to, wherever you would like to leave those, that'd be fine. Okay.
Yeah, I'm ready. You can make sure I get those two.
Mr. Hussain, could you provide one of your extra copies to the stenographer?
I'll be glad to not be carrying these home tonight.
I understand.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
All of those in here,
Pardon?
those are in here.
Yeah.
All right, Ms. Burke is our next witness who'd like to testify today. Ms. Burke, could you please remain standing? Could you state and spell your name for the record first?
Patricia Burke, B-U-R-K-E.
Thank you. Do you swear or affirm that the matters in which you're going to testify are the truth?
Yes.
You may proceed.
So my written testimony is a little longer than what I'm going to say because the health was already covered pretty well.
Thank you.
My name is Patricia Burke. I'm from Norfolk, Massachusetts. While the Commonwealth determines the cost to ratepayers for the Worcester National Grid Smart Meter Pilot Program, it's important to make sure that the ratepayers got what they paid for, which is an accurate, impartial analysis of the pilot to determine whether or not smart meters are a reasonable investment for Massachusetts. On August 16th of 2017, the Worcester Telegram and Gazette published an article by the Massachusetts State House News Service entitled, "Worcester Cited as an Example of a Power Grid That Isn't Stupid." Quote, "If your power goes off at your house, the only way you'd know right now is if you pick up the phone and call us," unquote, National Grid Massachusetts President Marcy Reed told policymakers from around the country Tuesday. A lot of people just assume in this day of technology, of course we know. Well, we don't. It's dumb grid. The exception is Worcester, where Reed said a pilot modernization project has allowed 11,000 customers to save $1.8 million over the last year of the pilot. Reed said that in Worcester, National Grid offered customers the ability to opt out of the pilot, and only 2% opted out. So I'm expressing 4 areas of concern. The first is the results reporting and the absence of impartial oversight. Smart meter pilot reports from NSTAR Eversource and Fitchburg Electric transparently tabulated how many participants they attempted to enroll and how many opted out. The previous 2 pilots did not support the conclusion that smart meters are a reasonable investment. Navigant and Marcy Reed reported that the Worcester pilot had a remarkable 98% retention rate. Page 134 of the Navigant report states that the pilot started in 2014 with a little over 11,000 customers, 11,184. It ended in 2016 with 10,361. The loss of over 800 accounts is a 13% and not a 2% attrition rate. But Navigant took the liberty of not counting retention until 2015, halfway through the 2-year pilot. And this was after 2 previous years of community turmoil and citizen opt-outs. And as Navigant reported, National Grid was still enrolling customers, and customers were leaving the pilot in the final year. The active recruitment statistics are not provided, but the pilot was experiencing a net loss. The analysis of the Worcester pilot took great liberties in how it depicted the variables of who chose a meter versus accepted a meter versus who opted out versus who refused a meter versus insinuating that an enormous number of participants moved or chose an alternative provider after they were auto-enrolled in the pilot. The Navigant report claims that 5% of customers offered an AMI meter declined to accept it at the onset of the pilot. This presumes that they knew that they received a smart meter and that they knew about the pilot. We have no way of knowing whether Worcester residents even knew that they had a meter or a choice. And in fact, at least 5,000 Worcester residents rejected the pilot before it started, which is 1/3 of 15,000 and not 5%. And an erroneous statistical assumption was made that throughout the pilot, choosing an alternative provider had nothing to do with objecting to the pilot or with opposition to National Grid. Those statistics were not counted. National Grid was also allowed to backfill for participants who opted out by installing a smart meter on the home of another unsuspecting Worcester resident. And this is why the approved pilot map had to be expanded to cover such a large portion of the city. The number of installations appears to be at least greater than 16,000, but it has not been disclosed. The actual number of installations and meter refusals for the pilot can be easily audited through work invoices. The unqualified 98 retention rate claim is misleading and inaccurate, and it gets worse. On page 44, Navigant states there were a total of 2,504 active customers in the pilot at the end of 2016. 2,504 is nowhere near 11,000. In the Navigant report, the percentage of active customers was not calculated until after the final months of 2016. Remember that new recruits were being added in the final months. An active participant is identified as a customer who visited the website even once. This includes participants who were enticed by a clickbait promise of a Dunkin' Donuts gift card or a free iPad, but then took no further action. Even with this maneuver, as far as the public record reveals, only 25% of the participants did anything to give any indication that they even knew that they were in the pilot, unless there are other dynamics that the public is not aware of. Of the 25% who were active, we don't know what percentage of these customers truly understood the pilot or its implications. For example, we don't know how many visited the website twice, but did nothing else. 75% of now closer to 10,000 participants who did not visit the website did not accept any technology. And we don't know if those who had the in-home monitoring devices were actually using them, which is about 1,000 people. So the unqualified 98% retention rate claim, especially when associated with the implication that the pilot had 11,000 participants, is ridiculous. We do not know if there were individuals recruited for this pilot who did not speak English and whose civil rights may have been violated. I do not know how or why it was legal for the utility to change a customer's rate structure and override their privacy without their informed consent. I do not know how it was that community leaders had the authority or the right to enroll the community in human experimentation. Non-consenting, non-benefiting, non-participating residents had no choice regarding their exposure to radio frequencies emitted by the meter mesh network and the experimental WiMAX antennas. National Grid and Itron covertly snuck smart meters on 5,000 homes and businesses in an early field trial, apparently without detection, before the pilot was even approved by the Department of Public Utilities. Itron reportedly donated the 5,000 meters in exchange for data. Was this fair to residents, and how was this authorized? National Grid has unsurprisingly already announced its intention to use Itron for statewide smart meter deployment. I know that extending the pilot until the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities makes a decision about grid modernization ensures that customers who did not know that they were in the pilot would not find out when their electricity rates would suddenly increase as the pilot ended. This is because participants who were in the pilot received lower electricity rates for every hour of every day, except the days when a critical peak period was called during the summer. Their overnight and weekend hours were less expensive than the daytime rates. The claims of cost savings of this pilot must be very clearly examined because even the passive customers had savings. Unless National Grid intends to lower rates when smart meters are installed, the fact that customers expressed a desire to remain in the program should be further investigated. They weren't asked if they wanted to pay for it. Unlike the Worcester pilot, there are no Dunkin' Donuts gift cards or free iPads budgeted into the grid modernization plans submitted by the utilities, and the grid modernization plans are not free. The pilot wasn't free either, but it was presented to the community as if it was free. Had participants been told that they were being surcharged for the pilot, some portion of ratepayers may have elected not to support the expenditure. This included the Sustainability Hub, which was also known as the Propaganda Pub, the booths of students at farmers markets, the newspaper and radio ads, and other community outreach attributed to the pilot. The National Grid Clifton Park, New York smart meter pilot is underway. It involves 14,000 meters. It's budgeted for 3 years for $26 million. And it is also reported to be behind schedule already. The 2-year Worcester pilot was behind schedule and over budget, reportedly reaching $60 million in expenses by the 2015 filing at the halfway mark once the pricing plans were in effect. This is 2.5 times more costly than the New York pilot. Despite the fees paid to Navigant, no complete, transparent, simple, final cost-benefit analysis has been provided for the Worcester pilot program, which involved both off-book and on-book expenses. This docket, MADPU 1828, which is heavily redacted, is focused on how much the ratepayers will be charged for the pilot and the interim extension. The docket does not provide a summary of the cumulative cost to date. If the books are cooked to give the impression that the pilot costs less than it did, it is crucial to also have an additional complete accounting to inform decision makers and ratepayers. Navigant reported that 69% of customers rated their satisfaction as at least 5 out of a 7-point scale, and this statistic has been reported nationally and internationally. But this analysis only involved 615 surveys and not 11,000 participants. So who filled out the surveys? In 2013, when establishing an invitation list for its initial 2-day Green to Growth Summit, National Grid stated in a Department of Energy report that they obtained the names of individuals who would be supportive of the utility's agenda. The guest list included politicians and community partners, as well as staff from the Department of Public Utilities. Smart meters were never mentioned at the Green to Growth Summit. It is an example of a significant off-book expense, as well as a manipulative exercise in the process of obtaining community consent. It is not known how many of those individuals who were predisposed to the utility's agenda were also in the pilot and completing the glowing final evaluation questionnaires, but we do know that National Grid did have its own employees in the pilot because one of them wrote an editorial for the Telegram and Gazette. The Navigant report states that National Grid focused on early adopters and easy installs when initially testing equipment installations. The reports of customer satisfaction rates at the end of the pilot may mirror the targeted efforts at the start of the program to ensure a pilot that delivered a specific result. Throughout the Navigant analysis, the phrase appears and refers to the number of customers used in this particular analysis, not the total number of customers in each technology price group. In how many of its interpretations did Navigant choose which accounts to include and which accounts to exclude? The extent to which the pilot was randomized and representative of a full deployment in National Grid's service territory requires further investigation. The highest reductions in peak loads were reported in the categories of customers who were required to have central air, high-speed internet, and/or a load control device such as a pool pump override switch. The peak event impacts for the groups that included central air appear to be estimated based on a total of only 30 accounts. As NSTAR Eversource testified, air conditioners offer the greatest opportunity for residential load reductions, but the estimated central air conditioning penetration in Eversource's territory is only approximately 38% for 2 to 3 months of the year. Moreover, residential appliance data suggests that there's little discretionary load beyond the air conditioner. 5 different customer load profiles were utilized by National Grid to customize communication to the pilot participants, and I'm shortening my testimony a little bit here. There were the 9 to 5ers, the late nighters, the double peakers, all of whom had low daily usage. And then the other 2 categories of the even keels and the homebodies, and these are people who had electricity use during the day. National Grid gathered personal information about a customer's usage to tailor their marketing, but they did not provide a breakdown of how many individuals in the pilot were at home when the majority of the peak events were called, which had the higher rates. What the pilot analysis did not reveal is how many of the customers who chose to participate in the pilot in the first place were not home during the day. These are the customers who will experience the least impact and inconvenience due to time of use and critical peak period tariffs. The final report for the pilot was hidden from public scrutiny on a DPU website under a 2010 docket, while the other 2 smart meter pilot program reports are not posted on this particular docket, which is DPU 10-82. The DPU website contains no search function capabilities. The claim that the pilot was co-created with the community is curious at best when much of the pilot was hidden from view and operating behind closed doors. The residents were in the dark. The question remains, what does the pilot imply for the grid modernization proceeding and the potential for full deployment of smart meters? Both Kentucky and New Mexico regulators recently rejected smart meters. PG&E, which is Pacific Gas and Electric in California, just filed its compliance report for 2017 recently. In contrast to reports of remarkable savings from the Worcester pilot, the California 2017 filing found no energy savings from smart meters, 0 energy savings. The results claims for the Worcester pilot should be independently audited. A second concern about the pilot is health and the illusion of customer choice. I'm shortening my testimony from my written testimony. Smart meters were never pre-market safety tested, despite the fact that National Grid believes that its smart meters are safe. National Grid did not surcharge the customers in the pilot who declined the meter, as it plans to do in its statewide deployment. National Grid used the pilot to promote its contrived commitment to customer choice. In fact, customers were not given the choice of whether or not to accept a smart meter. They were auto-enrolled in the pilot. And despite National Grid disingenuously publicizing its commitment to customer choice and a free opt-out in the pilot, National Grid is already surcharging medically vulnerable residents for an installation fee and a monthly surcharge for those who requested to opt out of the first generation of AMR meters. I believe this is docket 1383 or 1384. Yet National Grid's electronic radio off opt-out meter does not address the dirty electricity introduced onto the building wiring by the smart meter. While Eversource has reportedly provided no consideration for requests for an opt-out meter, the National Grid tariff is a form of discrimination based on a medical condition. To protect the health of vulnerable residents, a mechanical analog meter is required, but opting out from a transmitting meter does not protect residents from neighboring meters, especially in multifamily dwellings. The pilot could have investigated these issues. The third issue with the pilot is the question of power quality, which also pertains to health. Smart meters may not be modernizing the grid at all. Smart meters may be contaminating the grid. Testimony was recently given in an Arizona utility proceeding regarding pollution of the 60 Hz cycle due to the switch mode power supply in wireless utility meters. In his expert testimony in 2017 in Arizona, Dr. Sam Milham stated, "Dirty electricity or dirty power are terms coined by electric utilities to describe electrical pollution consisting of high-frequency voltage transients and harmonics riding on the 50 to 60 Hertz waveform and contaminating the electricity delivered." I'm shortening this a little bit. Smart meters are electronic devices which replace the electromechanical analog meters used to measure electric power consumption for billing purposes. The smart meters have circuitry to measure power consumption and a microwave transmitter to send this information to the utility. The health effects of microwave exposures are well known. All transmitters, including the microwave transmitters in smart meters, operate on direct current. The smart meters contain a switch mode power supply, SMPS, which changes the utility's 60 Hz alternating current to direct current. Because it is at the front end of a building's wiring, the dirty electricity from the smart meter's switch mode power supply has a gateway into that building's wiring and also into the earth via the house ground. The house wiring acts as an antenna, and the field's capacitively coupled to the body through the air within 6 to 8 feet of the house wiring or extension cords plugged into the outlets. I'm shortening again. It is my professional opinion that smart meters are a public health hazard. As Dr. Milham explains, it appears that radio frequency transmissions are being conducted along house wiring and then re-radiating into the home. In readings taken in homes in Massachusetts by power quality expert Dave Stetzer in 2013, high voltage transients were observed riding on the 60 Hz cycle. In one home, the plumbing was creating unsafe contact current because the transients were also riding on the copper plumbing pipes and faucets. The problem of having an electric grid acting as an antenna for the high frequency voltage transients is made worse by the introduction of smart meters. Polluted power quality affects all customers who share the same transformer. Energy-efficient devices, including solar inverters, energy-efficient lighting, variable speed motors, customer electronics, dimmer switches, and wireless meters are sources of high voltage transients. Health vulnerable homeowners seeking to protect themselves from radio frequencies in the air and on the wires have been forced to move, turn their power off at night, sleep in Faraday cages, buy costly filtering equipment and shielding, with various levels of success. Sweden has developed and implemented strategies for protecting the homes of some of the electrosanitized population and has created white zones and social service supports. Given reports of harm from smart meter deployment in other states, including California and Maine, the Worcester pilot could have incorporated monitoring for power quality with full disclosure to residents, informed consent, and independent investigation of health complaints. Instead, National Grid and the Department of Public Utilities relied on a liar-for-hire tobacco scientist for expert health testimony to override health concerns. In addition, Worcester's Department of Health published an embarrassing smart meter health report. The city administration sided with the utility against the residents. This is not rocket science. While the power quality is being monitored independently, a customer can wear a heart monitor or sleep monitor, and the readings can be compared. Sleep deprivation is a form of torture, and it is prohibited by international human rights law. Sleep-deprived ratepayers endanger the safety of others, for example, while driving. They have lowered performance, and they develop chronic adverse health conditions that can be very expensive to manage and treat. The unacknowledged cost of polluted electricity are being shifted onto the healthcare system and the social sector. This relationship between pulse frequencies on the grid and biological effects has already been privately investigated and confirmed by a number of individuals in Massachusetts and elsewhere, including heart rate disruption demonstrated by Warren Woodward in Arizona. We are apparently replacing fossil fuel pollution with another form of contamination, with radio waves in the airwaves that also ride on wires. Dirty electricity damages equipment, appliances, human health, and the environment. This cannot be swept under the rug. We are breaking our own hearts. Most people do not contact their utility company when they experience the onset of an illness, especially if they don't know that their power quality has been polluted. By looking at medical records and comparing them to wireless AMR installations in Massachusetts, an epidemiology pattern may emerge concerning the onset of many chronic health conditions, ranging from anxiety to MCS to fatalities from heart attacks and sudden infant death syndrome. If autism disorders are linked to the power quality of the mother's sleeping environment during gestation, the implications are staggering. If Alzheimer's and other neurological illnesses are directly linked to electrical disturbances in the cell walls, as has been indicated by Dr. Martin Paul's work, we are destroying the quality of life at both ends of the age spectrum, from childhood autism to Alzheimer's disease. Given that some portion of patients with chronic health conditions, including autism, MS, Lyme, and multiple chemical sensitivity, show remarkable improvement in a pure, clean, electrosanitized environment, it is unwise to continue with community-wide ubiquitous exposure in association with this access to essential services of heat, electricity, and water. Until the technology can be deployed safely for all customers, smart meter and smart grid deployment should be halted. In addition, meter manufacturers have failed to accurately report the incidence of electrical issues and fires, including fatalities, to decision makers, ratepayers, and investors. When the meter is mounted outside the home and the fire starts on the exterior walls, interior smoke alarms are ineffective. The meters are also vulnerable to electromagnetic pulses, which could cripple the grid, and to hacking. The potential safety and health liabilities for smart meter deployments are staggering. In a state with such significant scientific resources, I believe that ratepayers in Massachusetts would expect that we would consult someone other than mercenary liar-for-hire tobacco scientist Peter Wahlberg regarding human health and safety. And I have some resources here about Peter Wahlberg. I'm shortening this a little. The fourth unreported result of the Worcester pilot program is that many residents do not want microwave towers and antennas near their homes. The public narrative of the pilot has suppressed the truth about the impact of those living near the Cooks Pond substation. In 2013, Bill Jones of National Grid was so frustrated by the community opposition to the pilot that he wrote an article for IEEE calling for a coordinated industry response. The Smart Grid Consumer Collaborative was established in the same vein as the corrupted Tobacco Institute. The nonprofit industry front group has now morphed into the Smart Energy Consumer Collaborative. The tobacco scientist from Massachusetts, Peter Wahlberg, is the smart meter health expert for the group. So in conclusion, this is a quote from Dr. Allison Wilson, who's the co-founder and science director of the Bioscience Research Project. Science absolutely requires independence and integrity. Without them, science ceases to be science. It becomes a tool to manipulate people. The Worcester National Grid Smart Meter Pilot Program fires a warning shot across the bow of the future of smart cities, big data, 5G, and the Internet of Things, because the pilot appears to have been a foregone conclusion delivered by those who had the data. It demonstrates that data can be manipulated to support a predetermined outcome. According to National Grid, smart meters included in its grid modernization plans are necessary for implementing time-of-use billing. They aren't. Time of use data can be stored at the home and then collected for billing purposes only. Those customers who desire to have a home energy monitor can do so without the utility company consuming energy while it's collecting, analyzing, and storing the data, as well as misrepresenting it in this case. But that assumes that the time of use billing is necessary and desirable. Proponents of electric vehicles are working to ensure that electric vehicle owners can have workplace charging during the day to promote EV adoption, while a senior at home with a health aide, a stay-at-home parent, or a third shift worker will be surcharged one way or another. The grid operator ISO New England uses the annual peak hour of energy to calculate what each utility in the region pays for the coming year. On those days, Green Mountain Power in Vermont asked its customers to reduce their electricity use from 4 to 7 for 2 days without compromising safety or comfort. They educated their customers, and they may have saved billions of dollars. Massachusetts could have done the same. What the Worcester pilot did not test is whether customer education can be used to create awareness without the necessity of costly infrastructure that introduces an invisible form of pollution and unnecessary risks into the lives of Massachusetts residents. The consequence of deploying unsafe infrastructure is that it must be replaced, and this results in more profit for the utility companies unless they are held accountable for providing reasonable evidence that the technology is safe. Testimony by a tobacco scientist regarding health, financed by ratepayers, is not reasonable. The pilot was designed to entice, bribe, and reward customers, implying that they would not otherwise be engaged around energy savings, and assuming that the pricing and the rewards were responsible for any reported desired outcomes. This may be an outdated and an ill-informed assumption, but it is clearly designed to validate investment in billions of dollars of infrastructure investment for the investor-owned utility. The goal of the pilot was not to simply study consumer behavior or to listen, test, and learn. The goal was to drive the community through a series of boundary violations to paint a picture of a specific outcome. The smart grid is designed to monetize the data about electricity customers. National Grid President Marcy Reed said that the grid isn't just plain stupid, but manipulating earnest consumers into believing that they are practicing conservation while diverting resources away from other, more reasonable options. And unleashing unfathomable harm is really, really stupid. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burke.
I have copies for you too. I didn't mail them.
Thank you.
Oh, I can give you my original. And I'm also submitting testimony for Deborah Moore. Are you Melissa?
Yeah.
Oh, I must have been able to get it for you. I think there's 2 there.
Thank you. If there's 2 copies, I'm happy to provide one too.
Okay, I can. Oh, okay, that would be fine.
You can hang on to your original. Okay, at this time, I'd like to ask, are there any additional members of the public who wish to be heard today? Okay, seeing a negative response, I'd like to thank the members of the public who did come in and offer their testimony today. At this point in time, if there are no further matters, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the public hearing. I think we'll take a brief recess before moving on to the procedural conference. So we'll go off the record.